Near Mint Condition, the home of collected editions.
That cover's so awesome.
This is Mr. Chris Claremont, a legend.
Melanie goes,
Tired.
how's it going, all you Minties? Uncanny Omar here from Near Mint Condition, the home of collected editions. And join me today for my overview of these latest releases from Dark Horse Comics. So let's go ahead and get started. And welcome back, everybody. So, before going any further, a big thank you to the folks at Dark Horse for sending us copies of all of these books. All these books have been recently released here in the last couple of months, and we are looking at soft covers. And before I go any further, I do want to remind people to please smash that like button if you haven't yet. That goes a long way for us here on the channel. Very small thing you can do, but it means the world to us. And we've got several books to look at. As always, I like to leave in the description of the video the timestamps where you can find each and every one of these books, in case you're only curious about one or two of them. Alright, and today we are kicking it off with, let's talk about Carmilla, Volume 2. So here we have Carmilla, Volume 2, The Last Vampire Hunter. So this is a follow-up to the previous volume. It does have a lot of the same characters that showed up in the very first volume. And I love these pieces of art right here at the beginning and at the end. And this is all written by Amy Chu, and it is drawn phenomenally by Sue Lee. Lettering is by Sal Cipriano. So if you haven't read Volume 1, I mean, do you need to read Volume 1 to understand what's going on through here? Not really, because I think the way that Amy Chu writes, Amy lets you know ahead of time what is going on with the main character. And we are following, again, the character of Athena as she is leaving her home and heading towards San Francisco. And she does explain why and what happened previously to Carmilla and how she was able to stop all that. But the reason she's going to San Francisco is to go to Chinatown, because she wants to get to know a little bit more about herself. Her grandfather had left her this photograph, and she's trying to find out who these family members are that she never really got to know. And of course, when she gets there, things, well, they take a weird turn. Now, this is where she meets one of the new characters, and this is Jess, who will become, believe it or not, one of the most interesting supporting cast members in this book, because you never know what to expect. Now, in the first book, we had to deal with vampires. This particular book, she does run into a group of other type of supernatural beings. And one of them could even have blood ties to her. But the type of beings that she runs through here come from different lores from across the world. And I think that's one of the most unique things about this particular volume, is that they're no longer just using vampires, but they're using every kind of demon. You have the Korean, this is the Goblin right here, the Japanese Nureona, the Indian demon up here. And they're all having a huge fight for this particular sector of Chinatown. Now, how does Carmilla tie into all of this? Because if you read book 1, how can this book still be called Carmilla? Well, they're supernatural elements, so of course not everything is as it seems. Now, this particular book has 112 pages and retails for $19.99. It is a smaller size book, so comparing it to a standard size trade paperback, it is a little bit smaller. And we'll look at all the spines here in a little bit, but yeah, the dimensions of it are a little bit smaller than that of a trade paperback. And that is Carmilla, Volume 2, The Last Vampire Hunter. Beyond Mortal, this is the latest trade paperback from Cullen Bunn. And I interviewed Cullen Bunn and Danny Luckert a couple weeks ago. I've had the pleasure to talk to Cullen Bunn, I think, 5 times, and it's been like a yearly thing. So he has come back every year, and I still just enjoy talking to him, and I have no idea how he has enough time to talk to people about comics when he's busy writing so many of them. This book is 168 pages. It is an original graphic novel, and it retails for $19.99. This book was originally a Kickstarter, and then eventually they decided to add more stories to it and tie it in with another particular story that they're spinning out of. So if you watch the interview, Cullen Bunn and Danny Lucker talked about how there is a potential spin-off from this series that they're going to start in January. So what this series is, it is your take on, I would assume, your Justice League type of characters. You've got Commander Comet, you've got Mother Nature, you've got Torpedo, Devil X. All these characters like Superman and Wonder Woman, and of course Batman. And they're all these particular heroes of this world. Now, something does end up happening to the character of Devil X at the very beginning, where you can see that these characters have had a legacy, and that's just some of the superheroes. We also have supervillains like, Kraken, I guess, and there's other supervillains in supporting cast. But you've got like your Flash, you've got like Split Second in here. Kraken, of course, being like your Aquaman character. Now, that's nothing new, right? But whenever we're talking about Cullen Bunn, he always adds this little spin to it. And the spin is that there is a pantheon of elder gods that have just woken up, and they're coming to Earth to see what exactly happened with this particular experiment, or whatever they're going to call Earth, because I want people to be genuinely surprised when reading this. And it's not like these group of heroes are fighting villains now. Now they're fighting actual gods that maybe created us. So that's what this becomes. And honestly, there's a lot of horror element, like almost like Lovecraftian horror elements in this. And as I mentioned, they did add more pages than the crowd-funded book that they did last year. So they added, I think he said it was about 40 pages or so. In the back is where you're going to see the character designs for a lot of these particular characters, like Devil X, but that's the first version of Devil X, and there's Torpedo. And let me see if I can find, yeah, there's Split Second right there. But it's Justice League versus gods. It's superheroes versus gods, and that's what this is. And the sacrifices that are made through here, and of course with that horror element that Cullen Bunn always throws in, that ending I did not see coming. So if you haven't had a chance to read it and you're a fan of horror, definitely check this out. Don't sleep on this one just because you see superheroes in the very front, because it's got so much more than that in the book. Now, if you like straight up horror, here's Hellboy, The Crooked Man, and the Return of Effie Kolb. And it makes complete sense why they are reprinting The Crooked Man, because there is a movie that is coming out that will involve the storyline found in here, and this is a fan favorite. For me, I'm a huge fan of this because of this name right here, Richard Corbin. I actually have talked about this particular story a few times. The latest time I talked about it was in that Richard Corbin collection of Hellboy. But this one here does collect the Return of Effie Kolb, which is found through the BPRD stories, and it's the 2-issue miniseries. So Richard Corbin does do that particular story, and then you have Zach Howard supplying the artwork for the Effie Kolb story, and the colors by Dave Stewart, and the lettering by Clem Robbins. So the Crooked Man 1 through 3 are collected in here fully, as well as the Return of Effie Kolb, and that's issues 1 and 2. This book has 128 pages and retails for $14.99. If you've never read this particular story, this is such a creepy, amazing story that takes place in Appalachia in the year 1958. And Hellboy is just sitting down in a cabin with this girl that's being bewitched, and people are blaming this young lady named Cora Fisher. So Cora Fisher and this young lady had been arguing, so then Hellboy decides to just go and try to find this young lady. He walks in and runs into Tom Farrell, who has just come back home. He's been away, and there is a reason why he has been away. He's running away from something, and he's got this thing called the Witch Ball, which will become something really important in this particular story. Now, what he ends up this is so creepy. So So he starts learning more about Tom, and Tom tells him that he's been gone for a couple of decades, but now it is time to come home, and he was looking for his mom and pa, and notices that, or came back home and noticed that his mom had passed away. Now he's looking for his father. So they end up going to Cora's cabin, and this is where they find her skin, or a skin that belongs to somebody. And there's a scratched out Bible, and everything seems very familiar to both Tom and Hellboy. I mean, I love the fact that this is so well balanced because Hellboy has seen all this stuff before. So there is a little bit of a flashback because he's asking, or Hellboy's asking Tom the time that he saw the devil. So Tom tells him the story about this young lady when he was 15 years old named Effie Kolb, who is a witch, and he ended up making a pact with this guy named the Crooked Man. And the Crooked Man is somebody that serves the devil. He's been somebody that's so creepy. Again, Richard Corbin just knocking it out of the park. Is somebody that serves the devil, as the legend says. Somebody that had died from the town and now is serving the devil. So because of this pact he doesn't want to keep, he ends up running away and ends up joining the army. And witchery kept him alive, so he does end up coming back home. And speaking of witch, they do get Cora. She is a witch now. She can shapeshift. She comes back as a raccoon, and she takes over her body again, and there she is. But they do run into Effie Kolb, who is riding this horse, this just geriatric horse, and this poor horse is on its last leg. And what ends up happening, as she's leaving and flying away, the horse just falls over, and it turns out that it was his dad. Effie had turned Tom's dad into the horse. So the rest of the story in here, the rest of the 3 issues, because just a really quick pitch, is all about trying to see how they can get away from the Crooked Man, how they can break this contract between the Crooked Man and Tom. And it involves Effie, and it involves Cora. It involves Effie and Cora so much that the next story arc is the return of Effie Kolb. And this one is got different characters, and again, not Richard Corbin this time around. This one takes place in 1967, where Hellboy heads back to Appalachia to visit his friend Tom. So here he ends up finding a young girl, and this young girl thinks she's a witch, but witches aren't supposed to be around anymore. However, she's a different type of witch that can see the future, and she ends up seeing trouble for Hellboy and the entire town. So they head off into the woods and trying to find out what is cursing this particular town, and is that really Effie that comes back in this particular miniseries, or is it something else? In the back, there are no extras. It's just where else you can buy Hellboy books. And that is Hellboy, The Crooked Man, and the Return of Effie Kolb. Canary. This is another one that was a Comixology original, but this was published in 3 issues on Comixology. And now it is being published as a trade paperback from Dark Horse Comics. This is by Scott Snyder and Dan Panosian. And Dan Panosian is supplying not just the pencils, but also inks and the colors. Lettering is by Richard Starkings and Tyler Smith, friend of the channel. Love talking to that guy. And there is hella lettering in here. So all of this taking place in the Utah territory in 1891. There are a couple of flashbacks too. And what's happened in the town of Canary is that there have been just random killings going around. In this latest killing, this young boy had killed a teacher. And nobody seems to know why exactly these random killings are happening. People are murdering their neighbors. People are murdering strangers. So they do send, like, this guy named, first of all, he has a badass name. You've got this marshal. He's a federal marshal that is coming to this town to investigate. His name is Azrael William Holt. And this is the young boy that murdered his teacher. Dan Panosian, by the way, I remember him inking in the 90s. He has just evolved into this beast. The art in here is so damn good. I can't even compare it. Like, there are panels that I'm like, oh man, he's drawing or at least channeling a lot of Greg Capullo's artwork, but then I see some things in here from like Mike Deodato Jr., and then I see some things in here from Sean Gordon Murphy, and I'm just blown away like this dude just did, the kid's father. And what it ends up happening is that this little boy is holding this egg, and he tells the guy, the federal marshal, Marshal Azrael, or everybody calls him Holt, really, to take the egg and bury it. So he seems to think that something's going on with the egg, so he's like, well, perhaps there's a little bit more than is out of my league, so I'm going to call in a rock expert. And that's where Ed comes in. But not before we get this weird flashback of this fight between Holt and one of these convicted killers that he was after. So in the second chapter is where we do get a new character, this guy right here. Edison Edwards, but everybody calls him Ed. And he's the rock scientist, as Federal Marshal Holt likes to call him. And we also meet this young lady right here. This is Mabel Warren. Now, everything has been pointing to this mine in Canary, so that's where they're going to head. And to see what exactly is going on down there and what's causing people to lose their mind. This is horror. I don't know if it states that it is or not, but this is definitely horror, and it's psychological horror, it's body horror, it's the type of horror that I enjoy reading about. As a matter of fact, there's been a lot of horror in this batch of books. The first 4 books we're talking about have been nothing but horror, and I'm all here for it. We got October right around the corner, and I got to do some hidden gems in October. But anyway, if you're into horror elements, if you're into the Old West, when it's shaping up to be a little bit different than what it used to be, and there's new technology being introduced, I do love the fact that there's like telegrams and stuff happening through here, or telephones, and people seem to act like, oh, you've never seen one of these? But really is what's at the center of this mind that is causing all of these horrible things in this town. In the back, I'm going to just showcase some of the covers. There's Dan Pinotion's covers, Emma Rios, Jill Thompson, Cliff Chang, Dave Johnson, Francisco Francavilla, and then Comixology. This book has 184 pages and retails for $24.99. We've got the latest volumes of Powers Volume 5 and Volume 6. So let's actually look at the spines together, and then of course the backs of the books. And each one of these retails for $29.99. Let's talk about Volume 5 first. Now, Volume 5 is one that I had read before because it was available through the definitive editions that Marvel was releasing when it was still part of the Icon line. Powers Volume 5, and Brian Michael Bendis, Michael Avon Oeming, and then colored by Peta Pantazis and Nick Filardi, and then lettering by Ken Bruzenek and Chris Elepoulos. So I had read this before, but it's been years. Much like the other volumes of Powers, I do enjoy it. I think it's one of my favorite series that Brian Michael Bendis did, because it is going back to his roots of like crime noir stories. So this does collect Power Series 2, issues 19 through 30, and annual number, I think this is annual 2008. So again, originally published at Marvel Comics, and got to skip some issues because this one does have mature content. And a lot of it has to do with just violence and nudity and, of course, language. So previously published before, this one has 464 pages. So it is broken down in a couple of stories. The first story arc is about the secret identities that are kind of coming to fruition because everything is a twist and lie from our main characters. And this is this Chapter 5, A Secret Identity. So we are back to the story of Christian Walker and Dina Pilgrim and what exactly they can trust about each other. And there has been a big plague that's been going around in the first part of this particular volume. And then eventually what ends up happening is that we get the storyline where we have a bunch of the story arcs coming to an end. And I don't know if he was thinking about wrapping up the series during this time, because, I mean, obviously we got some more stories coming out, so much so that it's collected in the next volume. And I think this is the one that I enjoyed the most out of all the Power volumes that I've read so far. It had a lot of tension, and it had a lot of, stereotypical superhero stuff, but with a dark twist. I like the way that the characters were acting and how they pretty much reacted to one of the characters whose powers is betraying them. I don't want to spoil who that is, in case you haven't read it. It has a lot of suspense and action, just like the previous volumes, but I think this one had a deeper and darker turn. And I don't know what it was about this one that just stood out. It was nice to go back and reread it. As like the previous volumes, there are a lot of extras in the back. Trade paperback covers, variant covers, original covers, the script powers. We're going to actually move on to volume 6. And this is one that I haven't read. Never read it because I think they may have collected this one in a deluxe hardcover. This is Collecting Power Series 3, issues 1 through 11. Nick Filardi doing the colors, but again, Brian Michael Bendis and Michael Avon Oeming. And Chris Alepolis doing the lettering. This one has 432 pages, and again, retails for $29.99. All right. Hitler is dead, and now they have to find out who killed Hitler and what is going on in this past and the history of the powers in the past. Again, I hadn't read this before, so I wasn't expecting it to go in the way that it did. I think these were originally published at Marvel Comics, if I'm not mistaken, but it's just because it wasn't released in a oversized hardcover collection. I never got a chance to read it. So the next story arc takes a darker turn. And I say that about powers, like you're not expecting powers to be dark to begin with. But this time around, we're focusing more on detectives Christian Walker and Enki Sunrise. So it's a little bit different, and a little bit different with the interactions between those two characters. And this time around, much like the other book I talked about earlier, Beyond Mortal, they are dealing with gods. As a matter of fact, it starts off with the death of God, or the murder of God, or at least they claim it's God, but then you find out, oh, it's those type of gods. And are they truly gods, or are they just superheroes thinking they're gods? I mean, we're talking about fourth world type of gods. What exactly are we talking about? And I think that's where the mystery gets really deep and makes for a really confusing yet entertaining read. And then in the back, again, the covers and layouts. I love all the extras that they're putting into these books. Hopefully one day we'll get like some big deluxe editions of these. I mean, 2-in-1s, that would be nice. And now comes that portion of the video where we look at all of the spines of the books that have been released from Dark Horse Comics. And also a reminder to smash that like button if you haven't yet. And think about subscribing if you haven't subscribed to our channel. We do put out daily videos, sometimes 2 or 3 times a day, depending on how crazy the schedule gets. Alright, let's keep going with the overview. Goblin Volume 2, The Wolf and the Whale. I'm just going to come out and say I have not read Volume 1. This book is an original graphic novel, 280 pages and retails for $19.99. And I absolutely adored every single page about this book. This is written by Eric Grissom and Will Perkins doing the beautiful artwork here. And it is a story of friendship. It's about this little goblin that I assume in the first volume lost his parents and it was traveling the world alone until he met Fish Breath, this little wolf. Well, she's not little, but becomes his companion. And together they're just traveling this fantasy world where they run into a fortune teller. And she tells them all these 3 things, they don't sound good, that lead into the death of a friend. And he, Richt, that's a little goblin, gets upset. He's like, what do you mean, the death of a friend? That can't happen. And she ends up disappearing. And then we see that people are looking for wolves, paying 50 gold, and they run into some horrible people that are trying to capture them. So they end up escaping, and luckily for them, end up running into Silver Keep, where it's this little town. But even in Silver Keep, they can't get away from people. So, evil people at that. So what ends up happening is that both of them get saved by this young lady named Miss Evelyn. And Miss Evelyn has a sanctuary for goblins, for creatures, and that is called Underwood. And in Underwood, she asks Rick and Fishbreath to come and join her to live here free. There's wolves running around. It's just a beautiful place. This is Ula, one of the kids there. And it just feels like this amazing place. He lost everything in book one. Now I want to go back and read book one. And in this, it's like he's getting it all back. He's there with Fishbreath, his buddy, and he's there with new friends. However, it's not that easy. There's always a dark secret. And Underwood is a dark place. I didn't know exactly where this book was going to go, because it features, I would say like cartoon type of violence in here. But it went places I didn't expect it to go. Not too dark, but dark enough that I thought, oh, man, I think my kids would really enjoy this. I fell in love with this book. This is my pick of this batch of books. And there are a lot of amazing books, especially the next two that I'm going to be talking about. But I could not put this one down. It was a page turner. It was beautiful. It is the true definition of friendship and what one is willing to do for said friend that you don't even consider as a friend anymore, but family. And what is the meaning of that wolf pack? Oh, it made me tear up. I love this book. I thought it was phenomenal. And if volume 1 was just as good, I need to go and check that out. I don't know how many more there are going to be, because they do leave it open for more stories. And I want to know what happens to Rick and his wolf, Fishbreath. And I really like the new characters like Ula, Gabriel, those characters. Oh, this was so good. It's 280 pages, and again, retails for $19.99. It has to be young adult. This is book 1. Available where fine books are sold. I love that. But there's a website, realmofgoblin.com, and this is Goblin, the Wolf, and the Whale. Such a beautiful story. 40 years! I'm going to say that again. 40 years of Usagi Yojimbo. We're looking at the 40th anniversary. When did that happen? It's 144 pages. This book retails for $14.99. So in here, they're picking stories, and I think it is all handpicked by Stan Sakai. Award-winning Stan Sakai. Storyteller. I mean, one of the few storytellers that does everything. Writing, drawing, coloring, when it's painted, of course, and then the lettering. There is a foreword in here by Kevin Eastman, but here are the chapters, the stories that are chosen in here. So it's got A Mother's Love, Blade of Gods, The Way of the Samurai, Chanyu, which is the first time it's been collected in color. It also has Cut of the Plume, The Artist. That's probably my dad and The Mother's Love. It's hard to pick which one's my favorite. Buntori and Adachi. Kevin Eastman here praising Stan Sakai for the many years of just being this wonderful creator. And every one of these stories is different. Every one of these gives you a small taste as to the beauty of Usagi Yojimbo. Mother's Love is all about how he ends up finding this elderly woman, and she's asking Usagi for help because her village is being attacked. And they're being attacked by a gang, and the gang is being led by her own son. And where that story goes, I'm so glad they picked it as the first one, because when you see an anthropomorphic rabbit, you're like, oh, stories for kids. Nope. That will shock you, especially where it ends up going. Because, they don't shy away from death in here. Even though it's done in a cartoony style, it still hits. I love the tea ceremony. Again, this is finding himself in this tea ceremony, and this is all the Chanyu. But if you know what's happening during this story of Chanyu, it's when both of them, Tomoe and Usagi, are about to head into different paths. Oh, man, that one's so good. And It's one of those silent issues at first. The artist is the one. Yeah, it's hard to pick your favorite. The artist is beautiful. It's all about this artist that just wants to capture life. Like, he is in love with life. And Usagi vows to defend him. It's a portrait artist that has been marked for death by the government. And he just loves to paint. Because they fear that his paintings threaten to undermine the Japanese tradition, the artistic tradition. And because of that fear of change, he's been marked for death. So it's deep stories like that you are going to find through here. And again, wonderful artwork by Stan Sakai. Not really any extras. So if you've never read Usagi Yojimbo, this is the perfect jumping on point. Every one of these are in color. So don't expect that from other collections, because other collections don't have the color. All the colors here are supplied by Emi Fuji and Tom Luth and Rhonda Pattison. So they are all colored. I think IDW has released most of the stories in here in color in the past, but this is the first time that Dark Horse has done it in one book. Last but certainly not least, Creepy Archives Volume 7, previously released as a hardcover, this time around a trade paperback. And $24.99 instead of $49.99. And collecting issues 33 through 36. And if you're a fan of creepy or eerie and you worry about double dipping because, some of them are just reprints of previously released material, this one has everything here is new. Everything here is new, including this interview from 1994, I think, of Frankfort. No, 1983, and then you jump into 1994, and talking about just the paintings and his inspiration, and it's a really unique look inside of the brain of the man behind these beautiful paintings. This one has 256 pages. Now, I mentioned, of course, Frank Frazetta, who did a lot of the covers, but I mean, in here you're going to find the works of Sid Shores, Ernie Colon, and Nicola Cudi, Tom Sutton, and, of course, Richard Corbin in here. Now, every one of these particular collections have something different in them. Eerie and creepy. And this is all the story of course, oh, he's not in here, but this is Uncle Creepy being kind of like your guide into this particular world. You have sci-fi elements in here, you have horror elements, you have war stories. Whenever EC Comics were around and doing those particular EC stories like Tales from the Crypt or stories from the Weird Science or Crime Patrol, it feels like what they did at Warren was take a lot of that inspiration and just make it into one book. And I think that's really a unique way to just compile different stories, and you get different kinds of genres in here from different creators. The creators that they can, and they do, give credit to are always found at the bottom here, like the stories by Tom Sutton, and the art is by Tom Sutton, and then Michael Rosen actually writes the story in here. And there's Ernie Colin's art, and this is World War II, when Hitler wants to start bringing an army back from the dead so he can use them as zombie soldiers. And of course, things backfire on them. So it's alternate history stuff in here. There's mummy stories in here, there's gladiator stories in here, western stories, but with a little bit of that creepy twist to them. And if you've never read these particular tales, they're solid. All of them in black and white. The only color you are going to be seeing in here are the actual covers. And they're beautiful covers. But the inside of the magazines, and I love the way that these are reprinted in this magazine type of format. It is printed in this glossy paper stock, though. And if you're reading comics now, you start getting used to names, especially if you go back to like the Silver Age or even the Bronze Age, and you're going to start seeing names here that are like, oh, I know Rich Buckler's work. He went over to Marvel Comics. A lot of the guys, I mean, including like Archie Goodwin, right? Came from Warren, Louise Simonson, or Louise at the time, Jones. But that is creepy. And that's the last one. So that, as they say, is that. If you're interested in purchasing any of these books, don't forget to check out our sponsors.
If you're in Europe and you're interested in buying these books, definitely check out Walt's Comic Shop in Berlin, Germany. They have the cheapest pre-order prices, flat shipping rate of €12 for all EU countries, emails answered within 24 hours, waltscomicshop.com, and you can use the code nearmintcondition at checkout and get free shipping for all EU countries with your first order over €40. That's Walt's Comic Shop, your reliable source for omnis and premium collected editions in Europe. Ding!
CheapGraphicNovels.com, your online home for graphic novels and collected editions up to 50% off cover price. They have excellent shipping and prompt and helpful service. Check out their bargain deals for up to 90% off cover price. And don't forget, the CGN also takes pre-orders. That way you don't miss out on the hottest releases. And they are currently running a special promotion for you Minties. If you're a first-time customer, after receiving your order confirmation email, reply back to that email and let them know Near Mint Condition sent you their way. They will then apply a free shipping promotional credit to your next order in the US. Cheap Graphic Novels, your source for the hottest books with the kind of deep discount, quality shipping, and customer service that will keep you coming back for more. And that was the content and page count of each of these books. Let me know in the comments down below which ones you are picking up, which ones you didn't even know about that were coming out from Dark Horse Comics, and what other types of formats you would love to see these particular series in, whether it's oversized hardcover or deluxe edition, that is oversized hard, it's redundant, right? Or maybe omnibus edition or big library editions. All those comments, leave them down below. Any questions, leave them down below. Smash that like button on the way out. Everyone stay healthy and safe out there. Much love.